Hey there, it's Katy. Have you noticed as you listen to podcasts lately that there are a lot more ads? And sometimes those ads sound just like something that you would hear on commercial radio. They're loud. They're done by actors. They are discordant with the rest of the show that you're listening to. And sometimes an ad even interrupts the show mid-sentence. There are tons of companies who are offering to litter our episodes with ads. But time and time again, Tiffany and I have said no. I mean, the reason why is pretty basic. It's because that kind of advertising is annoying. And we want this show to be a refuge from all of that. We want this show to be a conversation as if you were having it with friends. And friends are never interrupted mid-sentence by an ad. That said, we do need to make money to keep this show on the air. If we cannot pay our bills, that's it. That will be the end of the show. And our hope is that you will appreciate this place away from all that frenetic commercial activity and show your appreciation by supporting the show with a financial contribution. $5, that's all it takes. $5 a month, less than 1 cup of coffee these days, at least if you're living in the United States. And you're going to get something for that $5 too. You're going to get bonus episodes, at least 2 a month, and soon maybe more. Online meetups, once a quarter, where you can say hello and help us record an episode. And soon you'll even be able to text us directly. And of course, you'll get a handwritten thank you note in the mail, with special gifts included. That's because you're important to us. You're not just some nameless donor. You're who you are, and that matters to us. I don't just stick the $5 into a spreadsheet. I actually think, wow, this person loves the show so much they actually want to help us keep it going. And that's why I want to write to you. I think of you as a friend. And we do have a goal. It's a relatively modest one. We would love to have enough people pitch in to get us over $1,000 a month. That would really help us get on a much more solid footing than we currently are. To keep the show going with all of our other obligations in life and work, we have just got to outsource some of the weekly work. We need audio editing help. We need marketing help. But we have no budget for these things. And yet, we are hoping that you will hear the call, that you'll become what I like to think of as a bittersweet lifer, part of an inner circle, a group of smart, seeking, brilliant people from all over the world who come together for this show and through this show. If we can get to over $1,000 a month consistently and actually sustain that amount for a few months, I'm going to reward you with a really fun listen. I'm going to let you hear the super secret pilot for the podcast I created that's called The X-Files. The EX Files. If you've been a listener for some time, you might remember that I won a contest. It was kind of a Shark Tank type event to create a new podcast called The X-Files. The EX Files. It's where 2 people who were once in a relationship and aren't anymore share their individual perspectives on what went right and what went oh so wrong. And then we edit their 2 accounts together and we see where their memories line up and where they do not. The pilot and the very brave couple that is in it is absolutely fascinating. You will not believe some of the memories that don't line up, things that you would almost take as fundamental. And I'm going to release it once we cross that $1,000 mark, that $1,000 threshold, and maintain it for a few months. So I hope if you love this show, you will hear my appeal. I hope you will become a bittersweet lifer today, become a part of our inner circle. You can visit patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast to pitch in. You can find the link in the show notes. Patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. That's patreon.com. If it confuses you, if you have any trouble and you still want to pitch in, just send us a note and we'll help you out. All right, on to the show. $5 a month at a minimum. Of course, you can pay more if you'd like. We will be forever grateful to you. And if you contribute, I'll be writing you soon, Bittersweet Lifer. Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katy in Seattle. Katy, though, just back from Bali, Indonesia, a kind of impromptu trip that I certainly wasn't planning on. You know, Tiffany, how oftentimes during our end of the year, we're kicking off into the new year episodes. One of the things I often say is, here's to all the good things you can't see coming. Well,
That was one of them.
The trip to Bali was the good thing I couldn't see coming because I was not expecting to go. I had no plans to go. To be honest, Bali wasn't even on my list of places that I was hoping to go. And yet my sister texted out of the blue that her friends had bid on an auction to have this villa in Bali and had found that they were unable to go year after year after year. And the villa finally wrote to them and say, look, you either use it this week or it's forfeit. Like, it's been 3 years, that's it. And her friend couldn't go. And so she just wrote to my sister and said, can you take this? I know you have a remote job. Maybe you're more flexible than me. And my sister's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll go stay in a villa in Bali, sure.
And so she invited me and Derek to go along, and as well as her husband and her husband's sister. And so the five of us went and stayed unpredictably in Bali for the week. And we just got back. So as we're recording, I'm still not completely over the jet lag. But for today's show, I wanted to kind of reflect on a thought that I was having there, and I thought it would be kind of a fun back and forth, and I haven't told you anything about it, so I'm just gonna lay it on you. So the idea I was thinking about is how so often with the internet and with social media and with like the advent of smartphones and the fact that major corporations are spreading all over the world, even you and I have talked about Starbucks appearing in Italy. And yes, there was a Starbucks at the airport in Bali also. But with all of this kind of like homogenizing that it seems like is happening by what we see on the internet, there's this feeling, I was having this feeling at least, that the world is becoming more and more the same. And when I was in Bali, I was very much reminded that that's not always the case, that even though we all live on the same planet, the feeling I was getting down there was that we all live in like thousands of different worlds and different realities, completely different cultures, completely different temperatures in the air, different attitudes, different approaches to life, and just fundamentally completely different landscapes and sound around us. Different smells, different feelings. And I just was reminded of everything different because Bali is so different from Europe, so different from certainly Seattle or the United States. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to explore the idea of the differences, the sounds, the feelings. And we can look at Rome, we can look at Seattle, and we can look at Bali, what Bali was like. And I think one of the things I kept thinking about was I would see these kids. Like one morning I took this walk. I got driven up the hillside away from where we were staying, and I just walked back down the hill through the countryside, through the area where people are actually living. And I kept seeing all these little kids. And I was thinking, yeah, when you're a little kid, whatever atmosphere you're living in is just the world. Like, that is all there is. When I was a little kid in Minnesota, I didn't question, like, why am I having to wait in negative 20-degree temperatures in a snowsuit for the bus? That was just like what I had to do. That was just the world I lived in. And only until you get older do you realize, oh, there's lots of different ways that the world could be. It depends on where you live. And so I was looking at all these little kids and I was thinking, this is their landscape. This is the only world they know. And I'm only in this landscape for a week, And so anyway, I thought it would be fun to kind of explore the different things. So I don't know, I kind of wrote down a few different categories. And of course, I thought we should start with what the world sounds like in the morning. And of course, you know me, I recorded on my phone what Bali sounds like in the morning. But the morning sounds, I think the morning soundscape is something I'm always very interested to find out what a place sounds like when I arrive in a new place. And Bali was like, so where I was, I should mention, was not in some of the deeply touristed areas or in the big city. I was on the far eastern side. I was in the closest town to me was a fishing village called Ahmed, which is fairly new to tourism. From what I read, there wasn't a main road that reached it until around 2018 or 15, somewhere in there. And
Yes.
so yeah, it's mostly still like locals who live there, but there's great snorkeling there and there's like beautiful sunsets there. So the tourists are starting to figure it out, but it wasn't like on a big tourist track. And I actually didn't visit most of the main touristy areas while I was there. I kind of stayed in the small village. So maybe my sounds are different than they would be if I was in town, but I was kind of in the valley between all these hillsides. And what it sounded like in the morning was roosters, first and foremost. And when there are hundreds of roosters, thousands even, I'm not sure, what they sound like in the distance are like the battle cries of an incoming horde. You know, it sounded almost like
Jeez.
it sounded like almost triumphant cries from the hills from the attackers that are about to come. And then there are hundreds of dogs, and the dogs would be kind of barking here and there along. So I'm like, it's almost like the dogs are with the gathering hordes. But then in the foreground are all these little brown birds that are chattering. So it's very, very kind of tropical, jungly sounding in the foreground. I mean, that was the sound of Bali waking up. Sometimes you'd hear music coming from a nearby store, and just the general passing of a motorbike from time to time. So contrast that to me with what it sounds like for Rome. What are the things that you hear when you first wake up in Rome?
Well, I mean, I live out in the suburbs now, pretty much the sub, you think you could call it the suburbs. And so I hear birds. I don't hear the traffic sounds as much as I used to. So I think probably this time of year, particularly in spring, the first thing I hear are the birds. When I lived in the center, I would say, yeah, motorbikes for
Hmm.
sure. People walking up and down the street, clackety clack on the cobblestones. Another morning sound of Rome that I wouldn't necessarily hear as I'm waking up, but you'll hear it when you're out in the city in the morning, are the clatter of espresso cups on saucers.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
A sound that I've always loved, and Aurelio also loves. He loves that sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People having their coffee brought out to them or putting it down on the countertop. And yeah, I would say those are some of the scooter for sure is like iconic. But
Yes.
definitely not. I mean, there are roosters. You know where I used to hear roosters was when I was very, very, very first living in Rome at my distant relative's home. They were further out into the extreme edge of the city, even further out than I am. And you could hear roosters from there, but just like one rooster,
Yeah, not 1,000.
not a horde.
Did you? I mean, I think of church bells also in the morning of Rome.
Church bells, sure,
And
sure. But
well, do you know what birds it is that you're hearing? Because I mean, that's the other thing is like these little distinct, like even the birds are different based
of
on where you are.
course, yeah. I mean, I definitely hear blackbirds because I think a blackbird has a pretty easily recognizable warble. So
Mm-hmm.
I hear those. I hear the parrots, but not necessarily in the morning. But you can recognize that
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure. I was thinking about that too with Seattle because I also live in not really the suburb of Seattle, but my neighborhood is pretty quiet compared to some Seattle neighborhoods. And I wake to the sound of the bus passing a lot in the morning, the giant bus clattering down the street, like the our pavement's very uneven, so it's very loud. And then of course chickadees are one of the first birds I hear every morning. And also, I'm under a flight path. So, one of the first things I always hear is the giant UPS plane, postal
Whoa.
delivery service plane, coming in, flying super low, about to land. And it is just the loudest plane in the world. And I also live by naval stuff, so sometimes those planes are even louder. But yeah, so those are kind of the sounds of Seattle. All right, well, moving on to a next category, the smells, because I feel like
Mm.
a smell can really bring you back to a place, and it
Oh, for
certainly.
sure. And I
Uh,
think a smell, we've talked about this on our smell episode or
mm-hmm.
scent. Maybe it was scent. I can't remember who called it scent or smell, but that's one of the, I think, the most distinctive things about a city or about a place in general
Mm.
can be, not always, but it often is. The smell is so, that's this place.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't smell that smell anywhere else.
Yep, and I feel like Bali was that times 1,000 because they ritually light incense at least twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. So the air just smells like incense when you are getting up and when you're going to bed, and it also kind of has is mixed with the smell of a wood smoke, and then kind of the just heat of like jungly vegetation. And
Hmm.
those things mixed together, I mean, I just started to love the incense smell in the air. It's unusual because how many places have you been where you walk around outside and incense is the predominant smell? Then
Outside? Definitely
I
not.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they burn it outside. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I would say there. I mean, Seattle I think is pretty easy right now, especially in the spring. It's basically the salt of the sea air. Like it really smells like the ocean. And it also smells like a lot of flowers right now, a lot of flowering trees, a lot of grass, grass,
Hmm.
flowers, and the salty sea air. It would be Seattle, I think. What about Rome?
Rome, there's a certain, I know I've mentioned this on an earlier podcast, but there's a certain smell of Rome that of Italy in general, it's not just Rome, that I don't smell it as I don't recognize it as much because when you live in a place for a long time, as I'm sure you know, you don't pick up on those things as much. But I think what it is the smell of pasta sauce being cooked
Mm-hmm.
because you smell it in apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And that particular smell would always bring me back. So that for me is probably the biggest Rome smell. I mean, there are probably so many more. And you always
Yeah.
said that there's like a smoke smell in the air
Mm-hmm.
for you,
There is. Yeah, and I still
which
haven't figured out what that
I
is.
don't pick up on that. Yeah. I mean, I smell cigarette smoke quite a lot, but that's not, I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you're right. Like when I came back from Bali and I was driving in the cab to my home late at night after hours and hours and hours of travel, because Seattle to Bali, let me tell you, is a
Ooh.
really far away. Uh, One of the first things I noticed was the fact that I could smell the ocean. And I don't know that I would have necessarily known that Seattle smells like the ocean. You know, I might track it at certain moments, but I think that week of being away, I was just like, wow, you can really smell the ocean. I was by the ocean in Bali and I didn't really smell the ocean, I guess. I don't know. Kind of interesting. All right, should we move on to a different
Well,
category?
one more thing about smell.
Okay.
Just a funny tidbit about incense, since you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't really like the smell of incense that you come across in like a yoga studio,
Mm.
this sort of Indian incense. I'm not totally against it, but it's just not, I don't find it an enjoyable smell. What I do really like is the incense you get in a Catholic church.
Oh, yeah, that stuff's great.
I really love that smell. And Aurelio is now an altar boy. And Sunday afternoons, his head smells like incense. I mean, like his hair just smells like someone's been waving a censer right over his head, which is what they have been doing. Because he stands up there and he has the little bowl of what they put into the censer that then gets burned, and that's like his little roll. So
Mm-hmm.
he's always got that thing swinging over his head, and he smells like incense.
And so then you make him just sit on your lap and smell smell his head for the rest of the day. I do love the smell of incense in Rome because that Catholic incense smell is so distinct.
It is.
I actually have a I'm a big I incorporate incense into my life a lot. Actually, it's sort of a way that I get in my headspace to work every morning as I light a stick of incense and then I work.
Wow.
And I have a lot of different smells, like a lot of different scents. Many of them are from Japan, but I do have one in particular that smells exactly like the incense in Rome. And that particular one is the most expensive, so I only allow myself to use that one when I want to be in a particularly, I don't know, reverent kind of mood, a quieter mood, because
Uh-huh.
it reminds me of the kind of deep big stillness of a Catholic church. And so sometimes whatever I'm working on feels like it needs that big dark stillness of a Catholic church this morning, you know? And so I'll use a stick of that one. But otherwise,
I love
the
that.
other scents are a little bit more lighthearted, perhaps. I don't know. Okay, here's another category: the attitude towards pets.
Mm.
So why don't we start? I mean, Bali I thought was very interesting, but why don't we start with Rome? How do people treat their animals there?
I do have to say I've seen a transformation in the 20 years I've lived here. When I first moved here, people did not keep cats as pets. I mean, I'm sure some people did, but it was much less common. Like cats were seen as stray animals that you might take care of, you might feed them, but it wasn't like it was your cat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you still see that a little bit, but I think that has changed. I think people are much more people keep cats. My sister-in-law has a cat who is her house pet and does not go out, is always at home. Although you still do see a lot of cats roaming. We do have a couple cats in the neighborhood that we think belong to somebody because they seem very well fed.
Mm-hmm.
But they're always sort of in the garage or on the street. And we name them. We have names for all the cats in the neighborhood. And almost all of them are food names. Uh,
Pasta.
um, no, they're
Pasta.
all sweets. There's Kit Kat, there's Cake, and there's Cookie.
Oh, cute.
And then the pool where Aurelio goes, which is part of a larger gym, for some reason they have like 7 or 8 cats that just hang out there. They're
Mm-hmm.
always there. Sometimes they're in the swimming pool area, just lying around. I don't know. They're just there.
That's
So that's
cool.
cats. Yeah. Dogs, I think are definitely more, have been, for a longer period of time. There's been the tradition of having dogs since the pandemic. And I think this is probably universal. Everybody has a dog. I mean, it's insane how many people in our neighborhood have dogs. Like, I think there are more dogs in the neighborhood than kids, and it's a pretty there's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
It's like every other person has a dog.
How do they treat the dog? Do they treat the dog like any differently than you would think people treat a dog in the US?
I think it's more or less the same. With the only exception being that it is less common here to spay and neuter.
Mm,
And
okay.
that goes for cats as well as dogs. People are starting to do it. Responsible pet owners are doing it. But there is sort of this lingering notion of, oh, I'm not going to neuter my dog. Poor dog. That's cruelty, which I feel like in the States, people don't think that way.
I think here in at least I can only speak for Seattle, but yes, dogs, certainly in the pandemic, a lot of people ended up getting dogs. I feel like just walking around, I feel like dogs are getting smaller and smaller in Seattle. I'll see people out walking a dog that is smaller than my cat, and it just feels like, how is that creature even outside? I feel like it's so little. It's just like the size of a parrot or something. But I feel like dogs are coming with more accessories now than they used to. I haven't had a dog. My dog passed away in 2005. I haven't had a dog since then, but I feel like, all my dog had was a collar and a leash. That was it, and you put the leash on or the collar on, and that was his getting dressed up. Now I feel like dogs have jackets, they have shoes. Every time a dog doesn't need shoes, for goodness sake, it's an outdoor animal. But okay, they have shoes, they have strollers.
I saw one like just the other day.
Hmm.
And two people, yesterday I was out on my walk and I saw two separate people carrying their dog in like what we would call in Italy a marsupio, which is like, it's usually for babies. You strap it on and the baby is in front of you. So I saw two people with dogs like that.
I mean, is it
And I
because the
just
dog
thought,
is too small to walk any distance?
well, to be fair to the dog owners or the dog walkers, because I'm not sure if they were owners or walkers, but in both cases, the person had like 3 to 4 dogs total.
Okay.
So if you're a dog walker or you have multiple dogs and one of them is significantly smaller than the others and gets exhausted, I suppose that that would make sense.
Okay. I have walked around Green Lake, which is a popular walking trail here in Seattle, with a person with a small dog. And eventually, halfway around, they just had to carry the dog because the dog was absolutely exhausted. But I mean, it goes back to dogs getting smaller and smaller. Uh, but anyway, so in Bali, it couldn't be more different. I mean, I think Seattle is also kind of 50-50 on the cats, not in that they just think of them as outdoor animals like Rome used to, but people are kind of 50-50 in whether or not they'll let the cat out of the house or not. the tide seems to be turning a bit where people are starting to feel like a cat should stay inside because they kill too much when they're outside. They're killing too many birds and other wild animals. But it's kind of a 50-50 mix, I would say. But okay, so in Bali, and I thought this was kind of lovely, to be honest. A lot of people own cats and dogs. They're very popular pets. It's very common to own one. However, in the morning, when you go to work and you let the cat out, you let the dog out too. And both animals just go on their own adventure for the day and then, return at night for food. And so all over the streets and everywhere, in the jungle, everywhere are dogs and cats on their own adventure. And sometimes the dogs, if they're from a particular place, will all be wearing the same color collar. So if you were a local in the neighborhood, like I passed two dogs, one quite small, one quite large, that were both wearing like a little red tie, very jaunty tie tied around their necks. And I thought, well, they must be from the same house. Those two guys are hanging out together. But, and then I was told that there were also these dogs who were free ranging, but they were wearing pink. It's not, none of them are wearing collars like you imagine a collar. It's almost like something is just sort of tied around their necks. But I was told that the ones that are wearing like a certain color pink don't belong to anybody, but they are being taken care of by someone, like an organization. So if they're wearing a pink collar, then they're free range dogs. But I did think that was kind of an interesting attitude of, you go to work, the dogs and the cat, they go outside and they go do what they're going to do.
I can see why that would be problematic. But on the other hand, it's like paradise for the dogs, I would assume. Even the cats, like especially the dogs, though.
I know. Not just sitting at home looking out a window, sadly, waiting for your owner to return. I did, however, see a dog get hit by a car while I was there.
Aww.
And I do think that I thought their ability to avoid all the dogs that are in the road was astounding, to be honest. And I was actually quite shocked when this dog got hit because I had seen so many dogs get swerved around. And so it was kind of a tragic ending to my time in Bali because I do not think that dog survived. But I did think that attitude was kind of cool. And I mean, the same goes for, the chickens and stuff. They're just walking around. They're just chickens, free range chickens. Their chickens are so thin compared to an American chicken, that you get like a chicken leg and it's just like, a thin, dainty little narrow, because this chicken has been running around the jungle for its whole life.
Well, yeah. And I mean, American chickens are stuffed full of hormones to make them become gigantic.
Yes, food is a whole other category that I don't think I'm even going to go into because
it reminds me, what you're saying about Bali reminds me a lot of how India is. In India, there are dogs everywhere as well. And they're generally on the smaller side, not tiny, but they're not like huge dogs that, you'd see on the street and you'd be afraid of. They're kind of quite small, cute little mutt type dogs.
Yes.
But they're kind of everywhere. And then of course in India, you've got this extremely odd thing that you'll just see cows walking down the street all the time because, I guess they're sacred and you can't kill them. They're just there. You'll just be walking down the street. There's a cow, side of the road, on the sidewalk. I never got used to seeing cows just wandering.
I did see quite a few cows, but they were usually tucked up into the forest somewhere underneath a little hut, keeping them protected from the sun, I guess. All right, let's talk about work-life balance.
Ooh, I love this topic.
Yeah. Now, we don't have to get deep into it because we know that we could talk work-life balance for an entire episode. And maybe we should. But, I mean, the general attitude is that people in the U.S. work too much. However, it was in stark contrast to what was happening in Bali. So thank you, United States unions, for getting us the weekend, which, we didn't have until the 20th century. There is no weekend in Bali. So from what I heard in talking to various people, staff members who are working at the villa, certainly, that they don't really have a lot of established holidays. They have certain holidays that come about for religious reasons. But the people who worked in the villa that I was staying at are there 7 days a week. And they got there by about 7 a.m. every morning. And they didn't leave until 9.
Wow.
And that
Oh
was
my gosh,
just
every day.
typical. Yes, that was just everyday life and no weekend. And the school, and I asked about kids going to school, and they said that school kids go to school 6 days a week. They start a little later. They start at age 7 rather than what we do, like 4 or 5. And they only go a half day until they are like middle school age. But even still, they go 6 days a week. I don't know. I mean,
Do they
it's
have
just,
summer vacation?
I don't think so, but I didn't ask, honestly. So they all are required to learn traditional Balinese dance as a part of their education, which I thought was interesting, both
I
boys
think
and
that's so
girls.
amazing. That's amazing.
But yeah, so that's it. So I was really thinking, like, wow, we do think of Americans as being obsessed with work. And I wouldn't necessarily say I got the impression that Balinese people were obsessed with work, but they certainly spend a vast majority of their life doing it. And maybe Americans are the same, but we at least have a break built in. Whether or not we use it is another matter. But I did think that was an interesting contrast. And something I think,
Yeah.
frankly, that we really take for granted, and those of us who live in countries where there is a weekend.
Yes. Not only take for granted, but I think a lot of people don't even know that it was the unions that got us those weekends.
But yeah, and
Mhm.
Rome also has a weekend, so it's like another thing that we, just think like this must be universal, that everybody has time off. But
Yes, but kids, some schools do have Saturday school on Saturday. Claudia went to school on Saturday.
mhm.
And it's usually, I think the way that it works, and I mean, I think this is dying out, but in some smaller towns, I think it still exists. You can choose to either send your kids to school a shorter day plus Saturday, or they're there for the longer day and no Saturday. They've got to get a certain number of hours in. And I mean, I famously complain every year about how long the summer break is for these kids. This year, he's getting out on June 7th. That's his last day. And I looked at the calendar. I was like, oh God, how does the calendar fall this year? And it looks like he won't be starting back until somewhere around the 16th of September,
Wow.
Katie.
That's
So, like, you get to August and you're like, okay, we're in the home stretch. It's August. And if you're like us and you do your most of your summer traveling in July, as we often do instead of August,
mhm.
that August seems like a desert that you've got to get across, and it's not easy, especially because it's so hot, and you're like, what are we gonna do today? Sit inside and just be in the air conditioning and play a board game, or are we gonna brave the city and try to actually do something? So you
Uh-huh.
get to the end of August, and you're just like, I've just got to get to the end of August, and you get there. Oh, you got 2 more weeks.
Yeah, it is a little excessive.
It's so excessive. The only thing that I feel like makes it okay is how hard they work those kids during the year. Like
Uh-huh.
just how much work it is. And obviously the older they get, the worse it is. So I guess they do kind of deserve it. As far as work ethic, I mean, I think everyone kind of knows the
Yeah.
at least stereotype of the Italian work ethic. I will say that in my experience, there are I don't know if it's 50%, 30%. I don't know what the number is, but I feel like there is a percentage of Italians who are carrying the load for the other Italians, and they're working a ton.
Mhm.
And they're like picking up the slack for a lot of people who either don't work, or maybe they work but they just don't work hard. Like they just kind of skate, you know.
Yes.
Mm,
Yes, I remember
So
I remember talking to my friend Ugo, who lives in Rome and works in a newsroom, and he's kind of in a leadership position. And I asked him once about the lifetime contracts and how that works if you're a news reporter, which is kind of an interesting. You're in journalism for life because, Italy, of course, has the lifetime contract. And he said that about 25% of the newsroom doesn't really do anything anymore. They just are dead weight, basically. But it's such an ordeal to get them fired that they
Mhm.
just accept that 25% of the reporters aren't doing their job. That's just astounding. That would just so not fly here in the US. But I mean, that's one of your most unique things, I think, in Rome and in Italy is the idea of the lifetime contract. It's an insane idea that you can get a job and it's nearly impossible to let you go. Like it's such a pain to let you go that people just don't even bother.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. It is. And I think I don't, yeah, it's a whole other topic. Like you said, we can't go too far afield, but
All right, let's do
yeah,
one
it's
more.
insane.
Let's do one.
But I do want to say that there are a lot of Italians who work their butts off and
Yes,
who work extremely long hours and who do work really hard.
your husband included.
Like my husband, exactly.
All right, one. Let's do one more briefly. Religion in daily life.
Mm.
So one of the things that I found kind of goes along with where we started with the smell of incense. One thing I found interesting and impressive with the Balinese, the Indonesian people, and the way that they incorporate religion is it's just habitual. It's almost like such a part of normal life that I don't get a sense of like how much do they consider it, but they have this kind of reverence that's happening all day long. So it starts with them laying out an offering every morning with incense, but then they also put together these beautiful little offerings. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but it's often like a folded banana leaf with a little pile of rice. And in different quadrants on the leaf will be different colors based on, from what I understand, what they're appealing to. But it's like different little flower petals. They're just gorgeous little things. And then tucked in with incense, and you see them all over the ground. You see them in front of every store. You see them on altars up and down the streets. You see them, even I saw them in a construction site that was active. It's just there's altars that are laid out every morning. And I asked them about these beautiful little offerings because over the course of the day it's hot. Bali is so hot. I haven't been somewhere that hot for a while, but it is basically sitting right below the equator. But it's so hot, it's just muggy. People are coming and going on scooters and motorbikes. The birds really love that rice, and you will get in there and just fling the little offerings around. And I said, well, how important is it to be reverent with these little creations that you create? Are you trying to preserve them throughout the day? And they're like, oh no, if they're not whisked away by the wind or thrown apart by the birds, we just sweep them up with the other general detritus at the end of the day and put out a new one in the morning. So it's just it had a casualness to it that was interesting. But then the entire landscape is made of it. At every single crossing, at every single bridge, every street corner, there's a statue of something, a statue at the points of conflict, as one person put it. If there's a potential point of conflict, there's some sort of god there just marking the way. So it's just the whole landscape. And I mean, that's kind of what Rome is like too. The whole landscape has like dots of religion. And it's not that the United States isn't the same. We have churches every which way. But I can speak for Seattle. There's nothing that we do that is like generally marking a specific religion in day-to-day life. I mean, it might be something that we personally do. Like you might get up and read the Bible every morning, but it's not like you'll see it spilling out into the streets unless it's kids going to Catholic school walking home in their uniforms. Things like that, or a special parade for a special day. Otherwise, it's very much like individual inside of a building. What I'm doing at home, what I'm doing on Sunday mornings within the church that I go to. It doesn't spill out into the day-to-day life like it does where I just was.
Interesting. Yeah, well, in Rome for sure, it's much more like Bali. And definitely it's not that intense anymore. Religious life is not as much a part of daily life as it was, but it's certainly more a part of the culture. You've got the churches on every corner. You've got mass happening every day, morning and night, 7 days a week in the vast majority of churches around the city and people going. You've got religious processions happening in the streets on a regular basis, not, it's not daily, but it happens regularly that, you'll be walking through Trastevere and you'll see the Madonna being carried down the road or something. And there's also the edicole, which are on the corners of a lot of buildings in Rome. I mean, I would say like maybe they're on the corner of a tenth of all the buildings in the city, which is a lot. Which is you'll get, and sometimes they're very, very simple, just sort of like an oval shaped bit of, I don't even know what you would call it. Like it looks like an oval shaped painting that's been stuck on the wall, but it's actually part of the wall. and there's a painting there, or sometimes a sculpture, a relief sculpture. It's generally the Virgin Mary and Child, although sometimes you'll get other saints. And some of them are incredibly beautiful and ornate, and some of them are very simple, and they usually will have a light of some kind on them, and they're everywhere.
Yeah. And I do feel like if you get into other parts of Italy, I mean, I remember this being in the Dolomites in particular when I was up there walking around a lot, that you would see like little roadside altars sometimes,
Hmm.
like a candle in there and like a Mary statue maybe inside some sort of enclosure on a post. And that would
Yeah.
be relatively common to come across.
Hmm.
It was refreshing to me to feel, and particularly, I think, it had been a while since I'd been anywhere, and I was definitely starting to feel a little dull of mind here in Seattle. And so it was very refreshing to go somewhere and have it be so different. I also had this thought, like, because of course we're getting ready to go on our Rome trip in October. And I start to think now of Rome as being quite familiar. But Rome is also so different from like day to day life in Seattle. And somehow like going to Bali reminded me of, oh, wow, as much as like we feel like we're all becoming more and more the same, we are so different. And sometimes it's I don't know. It was just great to be reminded of that, and then to be living in a culture for a week that was just so different than mine. It always is a good thing too to step outside yourself and think like, yeah, some of the stuff that we get kind of wrapped up in whatever culture we're living in can be kind of absurd when you step out of it for a week. Like,
Hmm.
one of the things that struck me is, I come back to Seattle and read the paper, and it's been like the Met Gala week. It's all about like the costuming and the fashion, and I'm all for a great fashion exhibit at a museum. But, when you go to somewhere as hot and tropical as Bali, where people are just sort of working all day long, what are they not thinking about on the whole? Fashion. In some cases, it was like, I felt like what people were wearing was like shirt and pants, whatever they grabbed off the top. And you're like, yeah, in general, hardcore working life, fashion becomes absurd. Of course, I'll come back into going like, oh, that person looks so fashionable. But it was nice to get that perspective where you think like, how dumb that we so so privileged now that we're thinking about like, how you can't wear ankle socks because it's out of fashion. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Are ankle socks already out of fashion?
That's what I hear.
I feel like I just stepped into that fashion,
You
and now
just
it's gone already.
you
Like I
just
just
bought your
noticed
big
it.
pack of ankle socks.
I didn't, but I literally had the thought like recently. I was like, how great that now you can wear high heel shoes with ankle socks. Like that's just so cool.
You
Like
can. I
that
don't
was
even.
just
I missed it
that
entirely.
yeah, that was a thing that was happening. And I mean, I saw it in Italy way, way earlier than I saw it in anywhere else. It was in the catalogs of Calcedonia, which is like the best stocking shop in Rome. And I remember seeing the pictures of these women in their mini skirts and their strappy high heel sandals with ankle socks on. I was like, what the hell is that? And I never really adopted it, but I was kind of just finally ready to.
It
And
was
now it's gone.
it was arbitrary anyway, right? All right. Well, we will leave it there. We are going to Rome in October. We do have spots left on our big trip to Rome, October 6th to the 12th. If you are interested in maybe joining us on an epic adventure, walking through the streets of Rome and seeing all the differences from where it is you come from, please join us. You can send us an email, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com, to get information. And we are here to answer any question, even those of you who have already signed up. If you got questions, we have answers. Always just email us, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. And it really is going to be an epic adventure where you will be walking around noticing things that you have never noticed before and seeing culture spilling into the streets that perhaps you've never witnessed before. So I can tell you from experience, from being away last week, very refreshing to go somewhere else for a change. All right, well, we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye.